at 10, losing kids. This seems to be the most popular theory about why William Afton started his whole killing spree thing, because seemingly he didn't kill anyone until after Elizabeth and crying child died at the hands of the various animatronics. But there are those who also treat this as a proven fact. But honestly, this is proven to not be the case, okay? It is impossible for William to be a psychotic killer because his kids died. As we learned from FNAF AR's Faz Facts, William made the Funtime animatronics around the same time as the Springlock animatronics. So, from day one, he made the robots that were intended to kill. Plus, if you want to ignore FNAF AR's Faz Facts entirely, the fact that Elizabeth and crying child got killed by animatronics that were designed to kill, hence why they were killed by them, even disproves that idea before FNAF AR. So, while it would make sense, it's not truly the case. And some of these other explanations may end up making more sense. Although, to be frank, I don't think that anyone actually knows the real origin, not even Scott Cawthon. And at 9, divorce. Another popular reason is possibly because William's wife left him, and that drove him crazy. I mean, being a single dad to 3 kids would already be pretty tough, but maybe this idea goes beyond this. A lot of people also assume that William killed his wife, considering how she's not around, and nobody really ever mentions her. This honestly could be an option, but only because we know so little about the home life that William had before the games, or even before 1983 when we see the sister location 8-bit scenes. So theories about this are entirely plausible, even if they just rely on human nature rather than evidence present within the games. I mean, these are human characters after all. They don't have as much meat to them as the theories involving info from the games or even from the books, but it's still interesting to see the possibilities like this. And like, did William get divorced? Was his wife his first victim? Who knows? Probably not even Scott. Honestly, I doubt William's motivation is something that like he thought of when he was throwing out the last game, when he thought that the game would end up failing. Yet here we are, 9 games and like 8 years later almost. And it ain't phone guy. Hold on, okay, hold on. Hear me out. I think that there is still the possibility, slight chance that despite what Scott might have said, that the phone guy could still be the killer. Now, this is probably almost definitely not the case. This is a list about speculating, right? Well, what if William is indeed the one recording these training tapes, and what we hear is what we see play out in FNAF 3's minigames? I mean, we thought that this was possible before, but then when they gave him a name, we figured that they were different people. But maybe they also gave us Phone Guy's name without us knowing it. I mean, what other reason would he have to be an Ultimate Custom Night? Unless the vengeful spirit heard the recordings and knew what Phone Guy sounded like? Plus, the animatronics bashing on the door could just be when William goes to disassemble them, which accidentally releases their spirits. But the tape's cut off before he ends up getting spring locked. Because, like, I don't know about you, but if I saw the ghosts of my victims, I wouldn't think like, oh, I need to vlog this. We have 2 different versions of Afton in Ultimate Custom Night already, so maybe there is a secret 3rd version, aside from the one we play as at least. And it's 7, accident. Now, aside from me, maybe this whole deal was an accident, right? Maybe more so than just his kids getting killed by robots intended to kill. Maybe William's real first victim wasn't Charlotte. Maybe he did kill his wife, but accidentally. Maybe they were a bit too rough, or maybe she had a condition that made her susceptible to falling or something, and William accidentally tripped her. Maybe when that happened, in whatever way it did, William saw the life leave her eyes and liked it, but then wanted to see how it would look on a kid. So he set about making robots that would help him see it. But his kids got instead. But then he still liked the sight of it so much that he continued. Maybe he wasn't built like it, but the sight of watching someone die, maybe even his wife or lover, awakened something deep within him that then propelled him to kill. It's nothing new, it's happened to plenty of people before, but William is dangerous. He knows how to cover his tracks. Despite the absolute buffoonery of his methods, the cops were none the wiser. Or maybe he was just paying them off. In at 6, demon deal. This may be because my brain is watching too much Supernatural, but the possibility does exist that in a world with possession, living corpses, sentient biological code that can possess animatronics and people, and where spirits can possess people to keep them alive to suffer, that there is in fact also a hell and demons. And if there are demons, maybe this is why William is absolutely god insane. Maybe he sold his soul to a demon so that his business would be successful. However, so that the Reaper wouldn't come to collect, William decided to start making sacrifices. Or maybe it was demanded of him as part of his deal or something. Maybe the demon he sold his soul to wanted a little snack every once in a while, you know, some baby back ribs. Or maybe, due to this deal, he seeked out getting possessed by a vengeful spirit so that he wouldn't actually be able to be sent to hell. Or maybe that was only a theory, but he was willing to try anything in order to keep himself from eternal damnation. Just an idea. I mean, it's It's definitely unlikely, probably like 99% not the case, but it's still interesting. Halfway through in at number 5, meta theory. Now, honestly, this isn't possible, not even in the slightest, unless Scott had some seriously messed up story in mind. But my meta theory is just because I want a chance to yell in this video. And to be frank, this would be my serial origin if I was Afton, okay? What if somehow, some way, William ended up seeing the FNAF Rule 34 art that's online, specifically about his various forms, particularly Springtrap. I mean, that would be pretty blasphemous if I'm honest. And time travel does exist in the FNAF universe thanks to Into the Pit, so in theory, Afton could have gone to the future and seen the absurd Springtrap fan art, and then gone back and had been so flabbergasted and traumatized from seeing himself lubing up Troll Tower that he went nuts and started killing the people responsible for his horrific perversion of his life. Whether it be specific people that did that or just the demographic that would grow up to then do that, okay? It could have just been the ships as well, like seeing himself shipped with the likes of animatronics that his kids end up possessing would certainly cause me to lash out. So yeah, not possible in the slightest, but funny as hell to think about, and frankly, understandable. In at 4, sacrifice. Maybe this isn't about fan art or a demon deal at all. Maybe Afton is just a religious man who worships the old gods, more specifically, the dark ones, and believes, like some ancient cultures, that sacrifice is the key to a peaceful and long life. I mean, in the end, if this is the case, he wasn't wrong. His misdeeds end up getting him possessed, which allows him to live for much longer than he should have without food or water, after being spring-locked for 30 years, and through multiple fires. I mean, if this is his motivation, this would absolutely make sense to him, and actually to him be proven true. Like, maybe he doesn't know that his body is being possessed, at least until Ultimate Custom Night when the vengeful spirit reveals himself. Maybe until that point he genuinely thought that he was being kept alive by the gods. Hell, maybe even after the one you should not have killed reveals himself, he's still thinking that it's one of the gods instead of one of his victims. Crazy people believe crazy things, right? So who knows? Maybe Afton just thinks he's doing the Dark Lord's bidding in exchange for eternal life, or maybe an end to his suffering after losing his wife, or something like that, okay? There are many explanations, although I doubt that this one is very likely. I still like talking about it. It's fun to explore. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, dream theory. There is also the possibility that none of this was real, and that everything is actually a dream, which kind of negates the whole origin story thing, because in a dream, we don't need to worry about origin stories. We just worry about what's happening in the present moment. I mean, dreaming about yourself having a nightmare is a whole other level of meta, like Inception style, but also not really, because in this scenario, Crying Child would actually be dreaming about dreaming, whereas in Inception, they don't know that any of those dreams are actually dreams. It's also interesting since if Crying Child is dreaming all of this, he dreams that he also died, but then somehow the dream continues past that, which I've never had happen before. If I die in a dream, I wake up, which in my opinion makes more of a case for him being the vengeful spirit, but I don't like dream theory because it feels cheap, so I'm not even going to entertain the thought of it any more than I have to. If dream theory is correct, which seems to be no longer the case, but maybe it was intended beforehand, then the origin of William is totally obsolete, so let's hope it's not dream theory. But ultimately, in a number 2, time loop. Could Afton be stuck in a Groundhog Day-like scenario? Instead of a day, it's however many years. I mean, this one is absolutely wild and 100% guaranteed not to be the case, but ever since time travel was introduced into the series, it's a whole other thing now. Literally, the first Fazbear Frights book had to do us like that. Anyway, what if William actually started living his life on repeat, the same thing over and over? That would drive anyone crazy. I mean, like, just look at what happened to Bill Murray. But if we ended up thinking about it, if William didn't think that there were consequences and then he went berserk, maybe he started offing people because he could, but then the cycle broke. It's absolutely ridiculous, and again, 100% not the case, but it's pretty interesting to consider. I mean, the time-traveling ball pit had the golden Bonnie and was introduced for a reason, right? Maybe it's to show that Afton is all about time travel, or something along those lines. Again, no way this is real, so don't yell at me in the comments. It's a stupid idea, but it's fun to think about nonetheless. And finally, in at number 1, psychopath. There's also the classic reason that there is no reason, and that William is just your typical run-of-the-mill psychopath who has no remorse for any of his actions. Now, the vengeful spirit, referred to as the one you should not have killed, seems to prevent this theory from being true, since if he had no remorse, nobody would be considered the one you should not have killed. But remember that actually, they named themselves. William didn't actually name them because the manifestations in his head were made by this vengeful spirit who wanted him to suffer. So William might not have considered them, whether it be Cassidy or Crying Child, one that he should not have killed, or at least had a hand in killing, but they could have considered it and like, you shouldn't have killed me because now I'm possessing you. Like, it's entirely plausible that William has no regrets for any of his actions, hence why he continued his killing after losing 2 out of his 3 children to it. I mean, like, he even sent Michael down there to see his sister possessing a robot who then also tried to kill him. So, I think it's safe to say that he probably doesn't care about losing people that he should love. He probably only had kids to actually seem normal, like those who are considered psychopaths or more commonly sociopaths. They do things to try and fit in, usually. In a 10, spring lock. A lot of people still think that Afton died while being spring locked in FNAF 3. And honestly, when the game came out, this was actually seemingly correct. I mean, we never really saw Afton go limp like he truly died, but for all intents and purposes, Afton was dead in FNAF 3. But then, as more games came out and more was added to the story and to the lore, Afton was shown to never have died in the game, since, you know, he was, as we now know, being kept alive by the one you should not have killed, who was possessing him as an individual and was keeping him alive so that he could continue to suffer for all of his crimes. So honestly, before William even started his whole always coming back thing, he came back from the dead, at least technically speaking, which I still think is damn impressive, okay? I haven't died before, even technically, unless we count like on the inside or my dreams, but hey, we don't need to talk about that at the start of a video, right? In a 9, explosion. Okay, so, well, physically speaking, William dies in The Man in Room 1280, the 3rd story from the 5th Fazbear Frights book. Quite extravagantly, might I add, exploding into a pile of mush right before a pastor's eyes. But like, how would that have been possible? How could William just have exploded like that? It's not something that you really think about, and I think I have an explanation, but it's certainly a bit more interesting than spontaneous combustion. William knew about possession and how it works, okay? He knew about agony and how his daughter got scooped and his son was crunched, so what if he tried to ensure his own survival by intentionally causing himself extreme agony, injecting or installing some form of explosive that when triggered or when in the vicinity of a Fazbear warehouse or trigger device would cause him to explode violently from the inside out, creating what is possibly one of the most agonizing ways to die, even in the FNAF series. I mean, this guy was absolutely mental, okay? Even potentially injecting himself with molten soul metal remnant in an effort to keep himself alive. So for me, it isn't out of the question that William inserted an explosive device into himself. But considering all that comes after this, glitch trap and whatnot, and the fact that Burn Trap still has William's body inside, I don't think that this one is really canon, and I don't think that this actually caused William to die. In at 8, second spring lock. I say second, even though technically Afton's second trapping was in the books, but also some may not consider that possible in the main series, but you know what? In the context of the number, it makes sense. So, could William have suffered a spring lock failure before getting trapped in the spring Bonnie suit like we see in FNAF 3? It's possible. Explains why I say again as well, because, well, it would have been first, but it's again on this list. Since William is described to have scars that are consistent with a spring lock failure in the novels before becoming Springtrap. So, could it have happened in the games? Maybe. We don't really see William in a visual sense in the games, aside from him being purple. So, I don't know. Maybe William was the reason the spring lock suits were retired in the first place, since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location. So, is that unfortunate incident William? There are plenty of people that it could be, none of which are named, but William having to deal with his own injury would certainly get them put out of commission for a time, but with William then continuing to use the suit to kill people and then putting it on again like we see in the FNAF 3 cutscene suggests that this scenario is unlikely, but you know what, it's still possible, so it's still a possible death. And at 7, FNAF 3. Okay, look, the last few numbers may seem to make this not make sense, but listen, okay? Afton, in a sense, does die in FNAF 3, since this was meant to be the final game in the series until the fans were disappointed with the main jump scare, okay? So, prior to Scott releasing FNAF 4, William Afton was canonically dead, and the series was over. But after that, things were more complicated than they ever had been before. And many people do consider Afton dead after getting spring locked, like I said, which isn't true, since he was being kept alive by the one you should not have killed. killed, aka crying child. Yeah, you're gonna get mad at me, but it's true. But technically speaking, until the continuation of the story between the time of FNAF 3's release and the day before FNAF 4's release, William was dead. Oh, wait a second. He shows up in the final newspaper in the background, doesn't he? I don't know. Maybe he was never supposed to be dead, but the series was supposed to be. So as far as I'm concerned, if the series dies, so does the character. And it would have stayed that way too if it weren't for you meddling kids and your damn animatronics. Afton would have been dead in the spring Bonnie suit eventually, okay? Never being possessed by his son because he wasn't added. He would have eventually ended up shutting down just due to the wear of the animatronic, since Henry wouldn't have kept setting fires that would remove all the rust and whatnot. At least I think that's how it would work. And eventually he'd have been forgotten when Poppy Playtime came out, so yeah, this counts for me. And at 6, Glitch Trap. Currently, post-True Security Breach ending, there seem to be 2 instances of Afton roaming the halls of the Pizzaplex. Or I guess, 1 roaming and 1 trapped in a giant ghost of animatronics past blob. So, this really begs a philosophical question: is Glitch Trap truly an instance of William Afton? Because if it is, then everything we should know about the series and how possession works in the FNAF universe is wrong. Currently, from what we've established in this universe, there are 2 main ways to actually maintain life after what should have been death in this FNAF world, universe, whatever. Or at least in the games, there's 2, okay? The books also have human robots, but that hasn't been proven canonical yet. The games have Remnant and Possession, which are connected but aren't the same thing. Remnant is seemingly a byproduct of Possession, being a combination of metal and soul, showcased in the books as the 5 endoskeletons of the original Freddy's animatronics possessed by the original Missing Children's incident victims, and then Possession comes before that. But Afton wasn't possessing anything, he was being possessed. And Glitch Trap is an intentional feature within FNAF VR, along with also being a virus, or I guess the virus took the form of the main antagonist that was meant to be in the VR game. But it also takes control over Vanessa. The only explanation here is that either Vanessa is a robot, but then again, if she is, then why is she looking at herself in the rooftop ending if she doesn't have a soul because she is a robot? So maybe this needs its own video, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, let me know. Halfway through into number 5, Henry. In the case of William Afton, his first victim was the daughter of his longtime business partner Henry, which is hella messed up because she was 3 at the time, that time being 1983. And this is also the year that Afton's life starts going downhill in the worst ways possible. But he starts off killing and then sticks with that MO throughout the rest of his criminal career. But the fact that his first victim was someone who trusted him, who didn't exactly suspect him even though her father did, is something that even I fear, and I'm not even a parent. So I can only imagine how this must have felt for Henry. And if that was me, I'd be doing a lot more than burning down restaurants in an attempt to put William down, okay? I'd be doing it with myself, with my bare hands. Especially if he had killed my daughter when she was only 3 years old, okay? Afton got lucky that Henry didn't have more initiative in my mind, okay? I have no idea why he didn't, because I'd rather go to jail for killing the man that killed my daughter than chase him for 50 years trying to burn him to the ground. But like, come on, okay? Who would really blame him too? Afton got so lucky that Henry is just a little who wants to use fire to stop him, okay? I wouldn't care about going to prison if Afton had killed my kid. No chance in hell, especially when she was that young. I would have choked him out with my bare hands and wrenched his neck. Also, hello to the jury. In at 4, Zombie. There's also the possibility that Afton has been a zombie this entire time, and honestly, that makes me extremely angry. I'm masking it though. Because out of all the things that the FNAF series has done, this would be the cheapest and the worst. Forget Dream Theory, forget this all being a storybook, forget everything else. This would be the dumbest thing that FNAF could do, since it would basically come out of nowhere, okay? People already think that Michael is a zombie after getting innards shoved into him, but zombies aren't purple, guys, okay? And then making that into yet another like father-like son parallel would be so stupid and such a horrible retcon that it would be worse than it all being a dream, especially after establishing that Afton was being possessed prior to the spring locking, which would most likely have ended up with his death, and if he was made into a zombie, that would probably be his death point, okay? It would just change too much about the series for things to make sense, and would probably result in a whole lot of rage from the community, or at least I hope everyone would find this stupid enough to get mad at, because I would, and I want to be validated. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, FNAF 6. Could William have been dead before FNAF 6 takes place? I think it's a possibility, technically, because like what happened to Springtrap between games to cause such horrific warps to his body. Like sure, he was burnt in FNAF 3, but we also see him alive and not all that damaged in Sister Location's Night 7 ending cutscene. So where did all this additional damage and warping come from? The head becomes larger somehow and so do the feet. I don't know, okay? This genuinely doesn't make any sense. We know that they're the same person thanks to Ultimate Custom Night's voice lines, but I'm so confused as to what could have happened to cause this. I'm sure the extra damage comes from possibly fending off wild animals, since, you know, he's still a body, a rotting corpse that would attract scavengers. So how did the head of the suit get bigger? It's not like it evolved, it's not like it leveled up like freaking Magikarp from punching all these wolves. My only guess is that like William either broke into a Fazbear warehouse and tried to like reassemble himself, or I don't know, maybe the gases from an actual decaying corpse, if he was dead prior to this, caused the head to expand, but even that wouldn't make sense. I don't know, we see so much damage. Maybe being a corpse just caused the suit to mess up because Scott was like, that's what I want. But ultimately, into number 2, the Blob. The true ending of FNAF Security Breach is seemingly one of the most interesting parts of the game because it contains a whole load of little things to watch out for. It also actually ends the game, which at this point I think is probably the best thing. After making our way into Burntrap's area, Freddy is going to be taken over by Afton's newest form, and then it's up to Gregory to defeat him by using 3 monitors with corresponding buttons that activate fire and seemingly trigger his weakness, which is a whole other story. Players, you'll need to avoid the animatronics that come out after you, but you can use doors to lock them out. You can use Freddy to scare him off. There's a lot that you can do. And then when Burntrap is finally burned even more, I guess at this point he's just trapped, because like in math it cancels out, right? The Blob, which was like a tentacle monster thing that was attacking us, then attacks Burntrap, William, and then tries to make sure he doesn't get free, okay? Then we run away, but my question is, does the Blob actually kill William? That I don't know. Like, there are death animations in the game files, apparently, allegedly, I haven't seen them, but they weren't used, so we can't really consider that canon. Plus, the whole I always come back thing is definitely annoying, and I thought it would have ended before this game, but clearly not, so I don't know anymore. Just God, for fuck's sakes, please let William be dead. And finally, in at number 1, Never Died. Currently, what we know about Remnant and Agony tells us that to destroy it properly, we need to burn it, hence why there are so many damn fires in this series. FNAF 3, 6, and Security Breach all end with something or someone getting burned. FNAF 3's fire was all about dealing with Springtrap, FNAF 6 was about putting everyone who knew about the atrocities to rest, and then in FNAF 9 we burned Burntrap multiple times to try to get him to stop possessing Freddy. And then it's all because Henry learned that the only way to destroy Remnant and put these things to rest was through fire. But how is that really how, like, is that really the thing? Because like, all 3 fires haven't really done anything. They haven't done shit. We've been told that fire is the only thing hot enough to burn off the Remnant, but it's also been described as Remnant liquid metal. So if the soul infused metal can become a liquid, then how is it possible to just burn off the soul part? That's not how metallurgy works. I think it's metallurgy, I don't know. That's not how things work, okay? That's not how the universe works. Dr. Talbot is lying, he's William, alright? There's a whole video on it, go check it out, alright? William is lying, he made up the fire thing so he couldn't be killed. And it's Cassidy. Assuming for this scenario that Cassidy is the one you should not have killed, which she's not, but you know what, for you guys. This is one of the dumbest things that William could have done. Or maybe he doesn't actually consider it a mistake, since the one you should not have killed after all is keeping him alive. They're doing it as a way to make him suffer though, so since it's potentially a mistake, but could also be considered a good thing depending on the angle, I'm gonna go with number 10 for this one. But even if he does consider that a good thing, or if Cassidy doesn't end up being the one you should not have killed, which he's not, killing those 5 kids that made up the missing children's incident that included Cassidy was certainly a mistake, since it caused literally everything else in his life to go downhill. I mean, it was starting to go downhill, but it started going even worse, okay? And he does end up suffering extremely only because of that kill and the others, okay? So if you don't want to count Cassidy as the mistake, because she's not the one you should not have killed, which is still the case, I don't care what you guys say, I know. Count the missing children's incident itself as the mistake. In at 9, blueprints. There is no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state of the art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those. She can dance, she can sing, she's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips, she can take song requests, she can even dispense ice cream. With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton. This classic line of Afton being interrogated, I'm guessing, that plays the first time you open up Sister Location, just showcases how stupid this man is, okay? The cops know what these animatronics are capable of and what they were designed to do. And you want to know why? Because the blueprints are just readily available. This man included wireframes of a child being stuck in Funtime Freddy and just left it on his computer. What? Why would you do that? Well, that's so stupid. So when they found that, because obviously they're gonna search his computer, they instantly ended up being even more suspicious of him, and then they were keeping an even closer eye on him. That's also probably why he ends up starting to dress in the spring Bonnie suit even, maybe, which ultimately ends up screwing him over as well. So yeah, designing the Funtimes as killbots was definitely a bit of a mistake, but then leaving the wireframes on your computer was something even dumber, especially considering how one of them was meant to symbolize your dead wife, and the other one ended up killing your daughter. In at 8, Charlotte. While yes, Charlotte may have been Afton's first true kill, causing his descent into madness, this is more so because of what she really turns into. Because, like, somehow, this also didn't make Henry end Afton instantly, because if he had, I would understand that. But in the games, Charlotte ends up possessing the puppet, who then gives life to the other animatronics, which causes Afton to disassemble them and then release their spirits that then scare you into your spring Bonnie suit that crushes you, and then you start going even crazier. But even discounting the game aspect of her, like, killing being a mistake, in both universes where William kills Charlotte, Henry comes after him for it, which results in what should be his death multiple times over. And not to mention how in the books specifically, unbeknownst to her, she is an animatronic robot that was meant to replace the daughter that Henry had lost, but it's also revealed that the animatronic is also, her adult form is also Baby as well, who can switch between her human and baby form at will, and then her human form doesn't remember being Baby. So yeah, Charlotte in the books also ends up being Baby, which is just a huge mistake for both Afton, Henry, and Scott Cawthon. And at 7, Henry. And while we did mention killing Charlotte, why didn't you off her dad after you realized that he knew everything? Like, why did you think that killing Charlotte would not have any consequences? Like, you killed your business partner's daughter. That's gonna be pretty obvious to him, especially when he already suspected you were up to something, hence the green bracelet that he gave her, since he was trying to take extra care to protect her and then she still died. I mean, he could have done more, but that's still a vengeful father if I've ever heard of one, okay? And he hasn't even needed vengeance at that point when he gave her the bracelet. So then, you know that he's gonna come after you, or at least seems like he will, so why didn't you kill him next? Killing Henry could have done wonders for your criminal career. I mean, yeah, the cops are already suspicious, but as long as they can't find a body, you're gonna be clear again. Like, yeah, or even if you're paying them off, you'll be fine. They won't put you away for 5 missing kids. They won't put you away for a missing father as well, especially a jury who has to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that you are the killer. And then without a body, there's no real forensic evidence. And again, they didn't put you away for missing kids, so like, come on, just finally off Henry, and then you'd be able to stay as yourself or even Springtrap alive and then not get burned 3 separate times. Plus your son would be alive, so yeah. Well, Michael would be, not Crying Child. And at 6, Princess Quest. The whole reason Princess Quest is a thing in Security Breach was to lock Vanessa away and prevent her from regaining control of her own body, or at least all of it. So why did William create or allow for the creation of a sort of failsafe that allows her to escape? I mean, sure, they didn't expect some random kid to come along and figure it out, maybe, but given the track record of this series and Afton's life, you'd think that maybe he would have smartened up, at least after 40 fucking years. But, cause like, this is like having a self-destruct button on a bomb, or if the Flash has like a steal all my speed button that someone can just press, it's just stupid. Like, if you want something to work, why give it a way to fail? you know? Like, this is like probably one of the dumbest things that Afton has done. You know what, I think there are some dumber things, but depending on the way you look at it, it could have even been higher on this list. But seriously, like, what's the point to put a way to undo your evil plans? Like, it's one of the most ridiculous things in this story. And I get that we can save her and have a good ending, but that ending isn't even canon. So like, we could have done without it. It's stupid at this point. William has the brain capacity of a freaking toddler. Halfway through into number 5, Crying Child. I've had a ton of people complain to me about how Crying Child's death wasn't William's fault since he didn't put Crying Child in Fredbear's mouth and Michael did that, and then the spring locks failing was because he was crying. Mostly people were complaining about that on TikTok. However, to me, there is no logical way that an animatronic jaw would have crushed his skull. And you know what? Even not just to me. It should be to all of you as well. The spring locks, like, they weren't in use. They didn't have to keep the things to the side because it was in an animatronic mode. And even if it was, an animatronic jaw would require so much power to actually, like, accomplish the closing of that. So like, the only way that Crying Child's skull could have been crushed was if Afton had intentionally superpowered the jaw of Fredbear, which would make sense if he wanted to use it as a kill machine, or maybe even a backup kill suit, or maybe he was originally planning on using Fredbear, but then after his son got crushed in it, he was like, yeah, no, let's move on to Spring Bonnie, okay? This is just the worst way of going about it. There is no way that this was a spring lock failure. The Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning that the spring lock mechanisms, which are the things used to keep the robotic parts to the side, which are the things that would have failed, weren't being used. The spring lock failure problem comes from when those mechanisms are put under stress of keeping the robotic bits away from the person inside the suit, and then they fail, and then that's when all the metal parts go back to where they were. So if it's in robot mode, the spring locks can't fail because they're already in use, okay? Keep in mind, again, the term for spring lock in this context is referring to the parts that move the robotic bits away instead of the actual suit, which is also sometimes referred to as a spring lock, but I'm talking about the actual bits that would have failed because they weren't in use. In at 4, Elizabeth. Speaking of mistakes, what about your daughter? I'm kidding, although we can't really be sure if she was intentional or not, but rather, I mean, what about getting your own kid killed? Like, I don't know how William thought that this was going to work out for him. I feel like this guy just thought, like, how do I capture kids more efficiently? Oh, I know, I can make a robot to lure them in, and then make sure that my kids love the design so that I know it will work. Hey, honey, come here, Dad wants your help designing this thing. Like, what? Because like, then Elizabeth ends up making the most predictable move ever, and then going directly against her father's instructions to see the robot that is basically perfect in her eyes. Like, bro, like, William, why did you think that this was ever going to work out in your favor? Why did you think that this was going to just be all peachy? When has a kid ever listened to a parent, especially at seemingly what her age is, especially when they might be loaded because you have a successful entertainment business, okay? Spoiled rich kids listening to their dads when they say not to touch a giant robot made specifically to appeal to their generation? Yeah, great idea. You are a special kind of stupid. Just like, add a blacklist of kids not to take. Really. I mean, you have facial recognition tech in FNAF 2. So come on, just set up a blacklist. Just do it. Wait. Listen to the Shia LaBeouf and just do it. Getting close to the end, into number 3, animatronics. Like, how the absolute living hell did he end up getting away with this? The smell of rotting bodies would also ruin the pizza place. The heat from the animatronics insides when they're actually like moving around would also speed up decomposition, and the animatronics are in front of people every single day. They even started complaining that the animatronics were leaking blood of mucus and it was smelling like death. If this was real life and William getting away wasn't important for the plot, he should have been caught on that and that alone instantly. Oh, we never found the bodies of these kids, but now these animatronics are leaking blood and smell like death. Huh, that's not related. Oh, they even make like bone crushing sounds when they move. And nah, we don't need to check these out. Or maybe we should. You know what? Fine, we'll take them in. Oh, look, we found the bodies of the missing kids. William Afton, you're under arrest. Like, boom. I don't see how this wasn't an open and shut case right away. Like, this was so goddamn stupid. They shouldn't have made it to the first game. His whole plan was a dumpster fire of bad ideas. And even if you think it was the puppet who put the bodies in the suits, why would they do that? Like, why would would they hide the bodies? But ultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. Being the brains behind some of the most advanced robotic technology in the universe, we'd expect a lot from William Afton. Like maybe using the brain that made these. Or maybe that's asking too much. Because I mean, he's the suit technician, but he's also the main killer who avoided the cops for how long? So, you know, he should really know what he's doing, right? Apparently not, since after discovering the original 5 animatronics were possessed, he disassembled them to learn their secrets, but inadvertently released the spirits of his original 5 victims. When seeing them, he ended up panicking, which is kind of reasonable in my eyes because, you know, they're freaking ghost kids, but also they're ghost kids that you killed. So then this absolute animatronic genius, the technician that handles the suit maintenance and has explained to every employee the proper procedure for the spring-lock suits, including the spring bodysuit he uses to kill people, ends up climbing inside the suit in an attempt to make himself feel more powerful and scare away the ghost kids. However, dumbass didn't notice the moisture of the room, the leaking ceiling, and just his probably sweat, which caused the spring locks that were active in this moment, since it was in suit mode, to fail, which would have killed him, if only. And finally, in at number 1, the Platinum Rule. The biggest mistake that William has ever made, and I will stand by this until the day I die, was the fact that he killed people in his own establishment, okay? It's unknown if this was always his intention, or maybe if he planned to kill somewhere else and then just was like, no, I'll do it here. But, like, come on, who the absolute hell thinks that this is a good idea? Who in the comments wants to justify killing your prime demographic for your business? Okay, dealers don't kill their best customers. It's bad for business. So why would William think that this is a good idea? Literally go anywhere else. This is basically just killing someone in your house. Okay, it's putting unwanted and unneeded scrutiny on everything you do. You even end up getting banned from going back while the investigation is underway. It didn't help your business either, okay? You had to close the first location, resulting in you opening another one that killed your daughter, and then you had to close that one and open up a new one, which ends up getting closed, and then you get locked in a room for 30 goddamn years, okay? This one mistake leads to literally everything else in the series. You don't do that. The Platinum Rule, we learned this from Barney Stinson. Don't crap where you eat, okay? If you just don't do it. In at 10, arachnophobia. Now, there isn't really any evidence to this since this fear is so incredibly odd, but since it's so odd and I won't really have another place to talk about this, arachnophobia is the fear of having peanut butter stuck to the roof of your mouth. Not the fear of peanut butter. Like, you don't even have to be allergic, just the idea of peanut butter being stuck to the roof of your mouth is chilling for whatever reason. And it's totally possible that William Afton might have had this phobia, but we can never really be certain, okay? It's interesting to consider. It makes him a little more human, albeit a slightly odder one, but I mean, this is a phobia for a reason. Maybe because the roof of your mouth is where, like, your nose connects to your mouth, or something similar. I don't know. Or maybe it could just be because William is a psychopath. Either rationale works for me. In at 9, aphobophobia. Aphobophobia actually is a fear that, in my opinion, makes sense, because honestly, teens can be stupid and incredibly annoying. Yeah, that's right, aphobophobia is the fear of teens, which could help explain William's MO, where he chooses to kill kids instead of anyone older. Maybe because he's scared of the older kids and thinks that they could actually overpower him. Or, in reality, maybe they'd end up killing him, because like I said, teens can be quite the severe pain in the ass. Or teens can be horrible, especially if they're hanging out at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Like, have you ever seen teens hanging around a Chuck E. Cheese? And if you have you ever seen them doing it because they like the establishment? No, they're doing it because they have some nefarious purpose in mind, whether it be vandalism, or to antagonize someone who's working there, or maybe just yelling at some children. Who knows? But they're typically never there because they just want to have fun. In at 9, gamophobia. Gamophobia is something that I'm getting closer to every single day. What is it, you ask? Well, dear viewer, the fear of marriage. Gamophobia is more than just being cautious or somewhat hesitant about making a big commitment. People who have this condition experience intense fear when faced with the reality or even sometimes just the thought of being in a committed relationship or marriage. For some people, negative or traumatic experiences in the past can contribute to an intense fear of commitment. Past relationships can also contribute to the onset of gamophobia. Toxic relationships, previous divorce and infidelity can contribute to a fear of getting too deep into a new relationship, which could actually help explain one of the most curious parts of the series, Ballora. We don't know if William was ever married. We don't even know if these kids are biologically his, meaning that he could have adopted or straight up kidnapped Michael, Elizabeth, and crying child. So, a fear of marriage or commitment could explain why he created Ballora, so the kids would have a mother without William needing to commit, whether it be due to childhood trauma or a previous relationship. But considering that he's a serial killer, I'm gonna go with a childhood trauma. In at 7, papaphobia. Papaphobia is one of my all-time favorite fears because it's the name for the fear of the Pope. Yes, the Pope. Like Vatican Big Hat Pope. It wouldn't really explain anything in the series or make much sense. Like there's basically no evidence for it, but William killing people is like one of the biggest sins, right? So such an unholy act and unholy man being scared of the most holy man in existence is kind of logical in my eyes, right? Is it just me? Like, this seems like the most realistic weird fear that he could have. And by weird, I mean something so odd that I want to talk about it. Like the fear of peanut butter being stuck to the roof of your mouth. I love phobias. I don't know why, they're just so interesting. Like the Truman Show, how they fake killed off his father so that Truman would be scared of water and then never leave his island. And at 6, autophobia. The fear of being alone is known as autophobia, which is also a way to help remember that autobiography is one written by the subject of the book. However, William having a fear of being alone could explain a lot of the series. I mean, this man ends up creating a surrogate wife animatronic, has 3 kids despite not seemingly wanting them around until he can't have them around anymore, and then loses those kids and goes berserk. Well, I mean, like he wanted to and was planning on killing before they died, but then he really goes hard into it after they died. But it could also explain why he tasks Michael with going to find his sister's possessed robot while he's supposed to be trapped in a room alone, because interacting with his only son, in any form I guess, could help with this fear. It could also be that his multiple personalities all keep each other company, since I'm sure every single one of them is a killer if he has multiple, just because it's William, so of course they all would be. Halfway through into number 5, ablutophobia. This one I feel is kind of guaranteed, but ablutophobia is the fear of bathing. And I mean, if a leaky ceiling was enough to cause those spring locks to fail, imagine what getting in a bath would do for dear old Willie. I mean, there's not really a point in being scared of it now since you are one with the machine. They've already spring locked, you're already dead, basically. But this man is decaying or has been skinned alive by these robotic parts, so a bath would be very appreciated by anyone who has to be in your vicinity, because you know, it probably smells atrocious. Like worse than anything that the Bones crew would have had to deal with on that show. Even the Palant stuff, because that was yikes. But, I mean, could you blame William for being scared of bathing after getting trapped in an animatronic suit that collapsed because it got a little bit wet? In at 4, panphobia. While phobias usually refer to specific fears, like ablutophobia being the fear of bathing, sometimes fears are more general, like chromophobia being the fear of colors. But panophobia is the fear of everything, basically. In a way, it's the fear of a vague and persistent unknown evil. And this, while a bit intense, could explain why William had a psychotic break. The fear that something evil was lurking around every corner, yeah, that's a pretty rough one, and would definitely cause some damage. Maybe even enough damage that he thought that he would have to protect himself. I mean, children can literally be the worst humans on Earth, so I understand his target market on that front. Like, I wouldn't be able to do those things, I'm just saying that, like, I think that maybe William thinks that he's trying to do God's work by eliminating those that he sees as evil. Evil. I meant evil. And this phobia would help explain that quite a lot. Getting close to the end in number 3, xanthophobia. I mentioned how chromophobia was the fear of colors. Well, xanthophobia is a subcategory of that, particularly for the fear of yellow. And considering how William got spring locked thanks to a yellow suit, he could associate that color with that crime, meaning that he would fear Chica, explaining the change in Security Breach, as well as Golden Freddy, which explains why there is no Golden Freddy in Security Breach as well. I mean, there are obviously other explanations, but I think this could be one of them. I mean, like, come on, it always seems to be like it's a stretch to be afraid of a color. But this begs the question, is anyone who watches these videos afraid of a specific color? Because if you are, please let me know below. I'm curious about how you live your everyday life, especially if it's a primary color. But I feel like you're pretty safe if it's green. Because I don't think green shows up in these videos pretty much. Because I can't wear green, otherwise I disappear. You don't see this because it's gone. So, penultimately, in at number 2, plutophobia. I genuinely believe that Afton had to have plutophobia. Not because he didn't want Pluto to be a planet, but because instead, plutophobia is the fear of money. And this man made all kinds of horrible business decisions. Killing people in his own restaurant, hiding bodies in the animatronics. I've gone over this in multiple times in multiple videos, but the only way I can explain it is if this guy was just straight up scared of money. It's like the only thing that in my mind really makes sense. Like, sure, you wanted to use it as a killing den for your homicidal tendencies. Sure, okay, but how about do that? And also have a profitable business, so your children don't feel the need to walk up to robots that you specifically told them not to touch. Or even enough, maybe just enough, to have a babysitter, making sure that they don't do stupid things, like walking up to the animatronics you told them not to, or running off to that place again, or stuff their siblings in animatronic mouths. Did that ever occur to you? Cause of course it didn't. Cause you must be scared of money. It's the only thing that makes sense. I've solved FNAF. And finally, in at number 1, robophobia. This is literally the phobia this game was made for. Like, sure, it wasn't actually the reason it was made, but seriously, this is the perfect fear for these games. While sure, the thought of mannequins can creep anyone out, robophobia is literally the fear of robots, and is surely the bread and butter of not only this series, but William as well. William must hate animatronics with a passion now. Since the victims possessed them, he got spring-locked by one, he can only survive by being in one now thanks to his consciousness being sentient code. I mean, it's ridiculous. If he isn't scared of robots, it would be a miracle. And I think he kind of deserves to be scared of robots, you know? Since he's combined with one, it would make him constantly in horrific terror, which is something that I think we would all love to see. And understandably so. I mean, this is the reason I can't sleep half the time. This guy caused me to think about everything way too goddamn much. What would have happened if William Afton was actually smart? That's what we're exploring today. Let's do it. Location. The location of the various crimes does actually factor into its effectiveness, believe it or not. The idea that William was killing in his own Fazbear restaurants is a ridiculous concept that in reality should have gotten him sent to prison. The saying is something along the lines of like, don't crap where you eat, which some take literally, others take as don't date people you see on a regular basis, and in this scenario I suggest that it should mean don't kill people where you're seen on a regular basis, or you know, constantly, because it's your own business, especially if it's the business that like targets kids. And while yes, this doesn't instantly make you guilty, but come on, the first thing that anyone would do in this situation, not even a cop, would be question everyone who was working when whatever had happened, or whoever it was disappeared. And let's be realistic, an incident the likes of the missing children's incident from 1985 would ruin a business permanently. None of this somehow they stay open bullshit, because in the real world they would end up closing permanently, because no parent would want to go to a place where 5 kids went missing, especially when no bodies were found, which could maybe help them, but it certainly wouldn't help much. If Afton had any competitors, any at all, alright? Even this world's version of Chuck E. Cheese, Afton should have gone there. If he had any competitors, or literally anywhere else, would have made more sense. However, he chose to kill where he eats, and that's probably one of the worst decisions that he could have made. Well, aside from, you know, the killing in the first place. Animatronics. While the animatronics are an entirely other mistake, this time around I want to talk about how stupid it was to hide the bodies in the animatronics. Like, how the f*** did he end up getting away with this? The smell of rotting bodies would already ruin the place, especially when its focus is eating pizza. The heat from the animatronic insides would speed up decomposition, and the animatronics are in front of people every single day. They even started complaining that they were leaking blood and mucus, as well as smelling like death. If this was real, and William getting away with it wasn't important for the plot, he would have been caught instantly. Oh, we never found the bodies of these kids, but now these animatronics are leaking blood and smell like death. Hell, they even make bone-crushing sounds when they move. We should probably check this out. Oh look, turns out we found those missing kids. William Afton, you're under arrest for the murder of Cassidy, Fritz, Jeremy, Gabriel, Susie. Boom! Instantly. I don't know how this wasn't an open and shut case. Straight up, William was so goddamn stupid that he shouldn't have made it to the first game. Not to mention how stupid he was by building the Funtime animatronics with these item containment chambers, as he was calling it, since the cops ended up questioning him about why he made those design choices in the sister location opening scene. Plus, he superpowered the jaw of Fredbear from Fredbear's Family Diner to end up giving it a jaw that accidentally killed his son. Absolute moron. William, not the son. It wasn't his fault that he got his head shoved in there. If he had put it in there himself, it would have been his fault, but he didn't. Enemies. Now, while William did choose a set of easy marks, since, kids can't really defend themselves against a dude in a part animatronic furry suit, but he's a moron for exclusively killing that demographic only. I don't know why he did that. Sure, it's easier on him, especially when he's fully combined with an animatronic, but Henry serves as the opposition to William, and the reason William ends up burning multiple times. It's not Henry's fault that he turned into Springtrap, but it's certainly his fault that he turned into Scrap Trap, since this is most likely due to the FNAF 3 fire, and the FNAF 6 fire turned him into Burn Trap. So Henry has definitely been a pain in William's side for ages. Killing Henry would have resulted in nobody being able to chase William, basically. Like, Michael might have figured it out, but he wouldn't really be in a position to do anything without Henry. Henry gave him the FNAF 3 job, probably, and definitely gave him the FNAF 6 job, so if William had just offed Henry after offing his daughter, he would have had a much easier time. At least, I'd think so. That's why every comic villain wants to kill the hero, right? Because if they do, they'll have a much easier time committing all their various crimes. So how is this any different? It shouldn't be. William is an absolute buffoon for not killing Henry when he had the chance. I'm sure it was Henry reporting him to the cops, like, you killed this man's daughter. Of course he's gonna have some form of vendetta against your ass. He's coming for blood, and he actively tries to kill you multiple times. That's not something that you should have just ignored. You should have just killed Henry after his daughter, because honestly it makes sense. Then you kill his wife, or the mother of Charlotte, as long as she's in the picture, knows about it, and actually cares, because sometimes they don't. But mom's gonna go after anyone who wronged their child, okay? Oh, that's something to witness, I'm telling you. Even my mom is vicious as hell, and she's like the sweetest woman in the world. So, you just get rid of the family, alright? Especially when it's your business partner. God, you're stupid. And while William may never have been caught for these acts, that's simply because he couldn't get caught or the plot would make no sense. So ultimately, the game had to find an excuse for his ridiculous behavior. But William could have done wonders if he had just been slightly more intelligent and maybe actually thought about things. Killing kids in your own pizzeria is horrible for business, so do that somewhere else, okay? If he had, he wouldn't have hid the bodies in the animatronics, which would have prevented the kids from attaching their souls to the animatronics that they were stuffed into. Thus, William wouldn't have had to disassemble them, which accidentally released their souls, causing him to hide in his Springtrap suit. The Spring bodysuit would have failed without him inside, thus preventing Springtrap from being created, and William wouldn't have been sealed behind a wall for 30 years. During those 30 years, he'd still be possessed by the one you should not have killed, since they didn't latch onto an animatronic in the first place, they latched onto him, and he'd be unable to properly die still. But he'd have an extra 30 years to work on bringing his kid back to life. He wouldn't have needed to send Michael to get Baby from Afton Robotics' storage facility, and Michael would have ended up fine. Fazbear Frights wouldn't have opened, resulting in the place never burning down, and the FNAF 6 game wouldn't have needed to take place. There would have been no need to repair the company image in FNAF VR. William would have been probably a millionaire, and he could have used that money to study ways to bring his son back. Perhaps discovering Remnant along the way, similar to how Henry created the Ella doll in the novels. William could have poured his grief into something, watched it become possessed, and then worked on recreating that in a robot version of his dead children. If his children even died anyway. Since Fazbear's wouldn't have closed, he wouldn't have needed to open Circus Babies, resulting in Elizabeth staying alive. And since Crying Child wouldn't have seen her get scooped, he wouldn't fear the animatronics. Thus Michael not needing to put his head in the Fredbear mouth because he thought it was funny, because his brother was scared. His brother wouldn't have been scared, so Michael wouldn't have needed to do that. William also just wouldn't have supercharged Fredbear's jaw, so even if Crying Child did get his head in there, which again I guess would technically be possible, he still wouldn't have died because of it. All of this simply goes back to William's first mistake, which was choosing to kill people in his own establishment. If that first kill also wasn't his business partner's daughter, nobody would have been suspicious of him and everything would have gone his way. Okay? Afton is smart. However, he could have been a lot smarter at the start, which would have resulted in him having an easy time on his killing spree, but I guess that wouldn't make for a very interesting game series, would it?